Welcome to the Point Out Loud Women Trailblazers podcast, Series 4, on leading change in education and community engagement, brought to you by the UWSP Center for Equity, Development, and Leadership. Here at UW-Stevens Point, we believe that transformative change begins with leaders who are passionate about education, health, and sustainability.
This series dives deep into the stories and insights of changemakers from all walks of life. Educators, advocates, and innovators who are shaping the future of our communities.
As Malala once said, when the world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful. Let's celebrate those voices and inspire action.
Today, we're joined by Alexa Posny. She comes from an incredible family legacy of women and men who've attended UW-Stevens Point. We are so excited about this conversation. You're going to hear her say over and over again, we are capable of so much more than we ever think. We're so excited to have you join us. Let's get started.
Welcome, Alexa. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing just great. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for doing this.
Of course. We're happy to have you. I would love it if you could just start with telling us a little bit about yourself and giving us your backstory.
When I think about myself, I think about the word education, because that is where I have spent my life. And it was probably the best thing that ever happened. And UW-Stevens Point is the major reason I ended up in education. What I've done is I spent my life, hopefully, making sure that every person learns as much as they possibly can. Everyone can be taught. And that was probably the biggest thing when I think about how education and schools have changed just within the last few decades. And it has to do with honoring the fact that every child can learn, even though they learn differently. So my career was spent really working with people with disabilities and ensuring that they had access to and earned anything and everything that they can and will do. And that has probably been the most important thing that has ever happened. And UW-Stevens Point has been a major beneficiary and has been one of the, I would say, a university that has really strived for making sure everyone learns and that they stay in education as long as they can.
Listeners, I wish you could see Alexa. Her arms are going around. She's smiling. She's nodding. There is so much passion on the life that she has spent on education.
I love that. And I have so much respect for educators and change makers and educators. My mom is actually a speech language pathologist. So again, yes. I have so much respect for you guys. So I'm curious, what inspired your journey into education?
One of the major inspirations is the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. I know people don't know that, but I've been familiar with and have known it since the day I was born. Because part of it is my family. I go back multiple generations in terms of who has attended the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Mm-hmm. My great-grandparents attended, my grandparents attended, my parents attended, and of course I attended. And what's even better is the fact that the majority of them turned out to be teachers. My grandmother rode a horse to her one-room schoolhouse so that she could teach every single day. My dad, and this is the one that I always enjoyed the most because some people kind of laugh about it, but I don't know how many people really knew the principal of their high school that well. I did, because the principal just so happened to be my dad. And he got a teaching degree from UW-Stevens Point in biology and went into administration. It was great. There's just been so many, and it goes back. I have lawyers. Part of my family have become judges, and they graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point probably 100 years ago. The journey has been great, and education is the most important thing we do, and I can't say that enough.
When you think about your family legacy, because as you point that, I'm looking at you and I see this legacy standing behind you, one person after the other, this amazing family. Why UWSP? What brought your family here? What created this legacy for you all?
The family goes back to it, and they've lived in Stevens Point for probably over 200 years. That's how far the legacy goes back. My grandparents lived in Stevens Point. That's where my mom was born and raised. My dad was born and raised in Chicago Heights, Illinois, but it was just so happened that Coach Cotel, he's a former coach of football at UW-Stevens Point, was the one who really encouraged my dad to come up to Stevens Point and go to school and become a teacher. So there's just so much, and so much of it, it's just what I have been grounded in all of my life, and I firmly believe in all of it.
How crazy is it to come from a line of just so many pointers? That's so cool and inspiring. What kind of advice would you give to educators and aspiring education leaders today?
That learning is different for every single person. When I think about it, there is no one way to teach. There is no one way that everyone learns. What I'd like to see is that teachers are building the communities that inspires, that teaches every single child, no matter what. And when I think about UW-Stevens Point in over 130 years, I go back to, it was a normal school to begin with and then became a teacher's college. Surprise, surprise. So what a great place to be in order to really do that. When I think about this, and thinking about to everyone who aspires to be an educator, please do it. You will develop, you will grow, you will enhance, you will inspire every person to learn because of the teaching that you do. And the most important job there is, as far as I'm concerned, is being a teacher. No one else has another job unless we teach.
Oof. Can I say that again? That got me. No one else has another job unless we teach.
Exactly.
With that in mind, I just would love one sentence from you, because you said something that really captured my imagination. You said teachers are building the communities. So how does a future teacher listening to this, how do they see themselves as a community builder?
It's if they just think in terms of the students they have in their classroom, they have a community there that can exist and will grow and will enhance everyone else. And that's, if we look at it that way, that's how we can learn to teach every single person, because everyone is a member of the community and we all learn differently. And it's just a matter of building that community and using all of the differences and the similarities among all of them to be able to build a community over and over and over again, no matter what they end up doing.
I wrote down, every class is the community. I wrote the in all caps.
I love that. And what a really cool opportunity just to have the opportunity to teach the future leaders. So that's a really cool impact that you have on them. And how could you say that your education at UW-Stevens Point shaped your approach to where you are today?
It opened doors. What college really does is it opens up so many doors and opens up so much more. The professors at Point just shared so much information about things that I never, ever would have even looked at. And it's just opening up all of that, because then it just helps you grow in terms of what other areas of interest are there. Because you're right, originally I did major in sociology and psychology, and those have been so important in terms of the jobs that I had. And having that as a background only made my experiences and my expectations even broader than before. And that's what I think about in terms of just being exposed to things that you never would have had anywhere else. And that's the importance. College is so incredibly important. And who you meet and the professors and what their background is. So many of the professors invited us to their homes. We got to know them as people, not just as the person who's in the front of the room. And it's just establishing and another community. Professors are part of our community as well.
I see a theme here.
Absolutely. I can definitely agree, just speaking from my experience. And I know a lot of other students who attended UWSP also can agree with what you're saying about the impact of college. I'm curious, when you think about the next generation and women and our role in society, what gives you the most hope?
The fact that it's already happening. And when I think about it, we just need to do even more. We need to open every door and let everyone in. And first and foremost, we need to do that because anything is possible. I mean, I just think about it, and I don't want to bring up politics, but when I think of, we've had 2 women who ran for president of the United States. When I was in school, that wasn't something that even was considered, and it's just opened up so much more. When I think about even my career and so forth, I never anticipated having some of the jobs that I had. And yet, for females now, it's not because it's female or male anymore. It's because we know we need to assert ourselves and be part of the discussion and just be part of it because we can. We just need to do more. We need to work hard. We need to have a vision. We need to follow our values and enhance everyone's possibilities and potentials.
Yeah. I love that picture you paint of the hope for open doors. What doors do you hope open for women next?
I know this is the simple answer. It's every door. It's the fact that nothing should stop them. It's the jobs are not male or female, other than no, I couldn't lift some weight. So I mean, I know that, but it's the fact that you can aspire and you can be anything. When I think about it, because I was an administrator at the building level, the district level, the state level, the federal level, all the different levels. And that's not something that I ever planned on doing, but it just, so many doors had opened up and I got to know so many other people. Again, it's going back and forming those communities by having different jobs or being exposed to different things. You join lots of different communities and it opens up so many more doors, because you have similar conversations, or you find out that, oh, gee, we really could do that.
What's one thing you'd like to ask everyone listening to this podcast do to further unleash women?
Because everyone is a leader. And when you think about everyone being a leader, especially teachers, they lead the classroom every single day. Teachers are leaders of their classrooms and their students every single day. Leaders are the voice. They're mentors, they're coaches, they're role models, they're designers, they're the future. And policy, in my mind, is what drives the system. And it makes it equitable for all. So when I think about, what people should do, you can do and be anything. If you just look for it or talk and have the discussions. I mean, there were jobs that I had that they didn't even have a name for because it wasn't something that anyone had ever done before. So it's kind of fun coming up with the names.
I love that. Who opened those doors for you? Titles that never existed. And there's Alexa walking through them. Who opened them?
Oh, wow. There were so many people. I have to admit, I do believe one of the other reasons, I had 24 different jobs, and I loved each and every one of them. And every single one of them really was so helpful in terms of some of the jobs that I had in the future, because I was able to pull in backgrounds and experiences that helped grow and help pull together things that we had never thought of before. So it's just thinking and being exposed to a lot of different experiences, a lot of different people. And I lived, we moved 9 times out of the first 14 years I was married.
Wow.
So every time we would move, I had to get a new job, but it opened up so many doors. That's why it allowed me to teach at elementary school, middle school, high school, be all of the different positions and so forth. It's there.
Yeah.
And it's just being open to it. And you don't necessarily have to move. You could just think about doing different things where you are.
Serena, I don't know if you're hearing what I'm hearing underneath. I asked Alexa a direct question about who opened doors. And then she told us a story about how she opened her own doors. Did you hear that?
I love that.
Yeah. All right. So listeners, that is Alexa's wisdom for us, I think. What doors do you want to go through? What doors do you want to open? How are you going to get those doors open for yourself?
You bet. And the best thing to do is communicate. Always. Yes. having the conversations and just communicating with everyone. When I think back, before I even became a teacher for the first time, special education wasn't something that was even in the schools. And yet I was going to be a special ed teacher. Mm-hmm. It was starting something that had never been done before. Yeah. And I was the first teacher of special ed at my first school. What a wonderful experience, just because we all worked together to see what it was we could do, how we could do it, and how we can go about doing it. And you're right, I opened my own door. Yeah. But I had people who supported it 100%. And that makes all the difference in the world.
It does make all the difference in the world. I can relate. It's always that support system that means the most. And people like you who continue to inspire women every day just by doing what you've been doing and speaking up. And I love that. If you could leave our listeners today with one key takeaway, what would it be?
Never give up. You can do anything. The 24 jobs later helped me understand that we are capable of so much more than we think. And UW-Stevens Point opened the doors to so many avenues in terms of jobs that didn't exist. It gave me intense background in subject matter, examples of leadership in terms of who taught me. It demonstrated, it developed community, it encouraged us. There is just so much when I think about it, but we are more than the sum of our parts. We can do almost anything, and that has become so much more prevalent today. We can do anything.
That was so inspiring. Thank you so much, Alexa, for joining us today on the Women Trailblazers podcast. You are such an inspiration to me. I truly feel so empowered, and I would love to stay connected, and thank you so much for being a trailblazer and inspiring women everywhere.
Yeah, and thanks for your service. Your service matters so much. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for everything you're doing. This is so incredibly important to get the word out.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for our 4th series on leading change in education and community engagement. We hope that these stories inspire you to create impact in your own community.
As Maya Angelou wisely said, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. Let's take that with us into our work and our lives.
Be sure to tune in to our next series where we'll continue to explore powerful stories and innovative ideas.
Until then, keep inspiring, keep innovating, and keep leading change.